online. And I thank everybody for coming. And I'm sure there'll be some other people preambling in, so it'll be good. So to get started here, this is congregation near Mordecai. This is actually operates both as a synagogue and a school. There's a full-time school here. And Rabbi Nir Aminoff, who's the rabbi here, principal, he runs the show, and he was very gracious about allowing us to use the facility. And I have to personally thank Avram Rafaelov, who I've been probably speaking to him day in and day out about making sure we're all set. And I thank him as well for all his assistance. So not to hold up anymore, but there was a discussion that we had in our office about not just the Homeland Security grant, but doing actually a security training session or workshop as well as a follow-up. And the Congresswoman was very strongly advocating for this. And, just recently, and she's going to speak about the additional monies that have been implemented, God willing, for the coming year. And so at this time, I would like to call upon our Congresswoman, the Honorable Grace Meng, to speak about security initiatives.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. To our friends who are in the audience and to those who are on Zoom, there are people at home or wherever they are watching this. And we are actually recording this session too. So if anyone was not able to participate, please let them know. I have notes, but you'll be glad to know that during COVID, I got readers, so I can't really see my notes, but just wanted to acknowledge some people. Thank you to the NYPD for what you do to protect our communities day in and day out, and for being here today. Thank you so much to the Community Security Initiative, Mitch Silver, Seth Goodstein. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you to my team. Rabbi Pollack has put a lot of work into making sure that we are having this workshop available to our communities here in Queens. So thank you, Rabbi. Taylor Jackson, our district director, thank you for your work and for being here and for handling, most importantly, the technical support, because I would not know what to do. And to Jordan Goldis, our press secretary. In case you are unfamiliar, the Community Security Initiative was established to significantly enhance the physical security of the approximately 2,000 Jewish institutions in the New York area. And it has since grown into literally a 24/7 operation, which has benefited the houses of worship in New York State tremendously. And unfortunately, events of recent times that transpired at Congregation Beth Israel in Colleyville, Texas in January really just highlighted and reminded us of the need for these trainings. I reached out to the Community Security Initiative to provide this training to ensure that our synagogues, our community centers, day schools, and other religious institutions feel safe and secure. So, the number one reason for this training is to maintain a safe and resilient community. Religious freedom is a basic American value, and it is under attack here in New York City and around the country. As you all know from the media and from social media, there has just been a rise in hate crimes and bias incidents in our city and throughout the country. Last month, we had our annual nonprofit security grant workshop, NSGP. It's an incredible resource to fortify houses of worship in our community here in Queens and to help other community organizations as well. And our community here in Queens has had tremendous success with this program. We've had over 20 organizations that have benefited in our district, and we hope to be able to help with even more. And I especially want to thank so many in the Jewish community because they've been so helpful to some of the newer organizations and newer houses of worship that didn't necessarily know about these programs before. We have been able to pass in the omnibus budget bill, I don't know why I keep calling it omnibus budget, to increase the amount of the security grant. It passed the House. We did not get it to the level that we wanted to, but we will continue to try. It's one of my top priorities on the Appropriations Committee, and it will pass the Senate hopefully in the next day or two. And so we look forward for it to become law. So, and just, you know, as a reminder, about a few months ago, President Biden signed my Hate Crimes Act into law. This will hopefully provide resources as it's implemented. It's through the Department of Justice and it's through Health and Human Services, be able to provide and make it easier for people to report hate crimes and bias incidents. We don't just want to know about something if it's a hate crime. We want to know about incidents that may lead up to, God forbid, a hate crime as well. So big and small, we want to know. We want to make sure that law enforcement agencies, because a lot of them around the country do not report. NYPD has stepped up efforts, but if you look at some numbers in law enforcement agencies around the country, it actually says that the number of hate crimes went down last year, and we all know that that is not true. So we want reporting, we want to get the statistics and the data. In order to best find solutions for any problem, we need to know the extent and the depth of the problem. And so that's something that we're continuing to work with the administration to implement on. Again, you know, I want to say thank you to community leaders like those in the Jewish community, because there were groups, national groups, some folks I had never met before. But when we were working on the legislation, they actually reached out and talked about what was important and what was necessary to be in the bill and how to most effectively be able to protect our local communities and to work with law enforcement and our community organizations as well. So you're not here to hear me speak, but I'm really excited. I just got off the train, if you can't tell. Very excited to be back in Queens and to be able to see everyone. And just thank you so much for being here in person or virtually on the Zoom. And please, everyone, stay safe and healthy and don't hesitate to reach out if we can be of help. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Congresswoman. So after we had this internal conversation in our office, I reached out to the CEO of UJA Federation. His name is Eric Goldstein. Many of you probably know who he is or know him. And he does a tremendous amount of work, obviously within the greater Jewish community and helping. He's right now, he went to Poland last week and he went to see what's going on with the refugee situation in Europe. And every Friday, he sends out a message, a Shabbos message. And I, from time to time, respond to him personally if I have to say something. So after reading about what happened in Colleyville and all this, I couldn't hold back. I sent him a message like, maybe we in the community should do something. And he said, great idea. I'm going to put you in touch with the head, the director of the CSI, and his name is Mitch Silver, and I've gotten to know him at least over the phone and emails and all that, and he does a tremendous amount of work. He's, I guess, a former member of the NYPD, and he'll tell you a little bit about that. But at this time, I'd like to introduce Mitch Silver.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for coming out tonight, either virtually or in person. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Congresswoman Meng, for helping us putting this event together. So I'm the Executive Director of the Community Security Initiative. This is a program that's just 2 years old now, And this is created by the UJA and the JCRC of New York in the wake of the tragedies at Tree of Life in Pittsburgh and another attack against a synagogue in Poway, California, with the idea of adding an extra layer of security, an extra layer of protection for the Jewish communities in greater New York. And what that means from UJA's perspective is Nassau and Suffolk, the 5 boroughs, as well as Westchester. So I lead a team of 5 regional security managers. We took our 8 counties and we combined them into 5 regions because I had budget for only 5 people to hire. Seth Goodstein is our regional security manager for Queens, and he's going to be leading the presentation tonight. I'm the former director of intelligence analysis at the NYPD for almost 10 years, where I oversaw the team that was looking at any type of terroristic threats towards New York City, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Hezbollah, other, and ran our analytic and cyber units when Ray Kelly was the police commissioner and Mike Bloomberg was the mayor. And when we put this program together, I said, you know, this is something I want to be a part of, obviously in the wake of these attacks in Pittsburgh, in Poway, and then frankly, as things got closer in Jersey City, that attack in December of 2019, and then in Muncie, New York, that awful Hanukkah attack against a rabbi's house. And all 4 of those attacks ended up being attacks with fatalities. So our program is trying to improve the security of Jewish institutions, help them win grants and implement grants. And again, I think we can't overstate the help that Congresswoman Meng has given in Washington to make sure that there are funds available to help secure the institutions. And that's one of the main things that Seth and the other regional security managers are working on a regular basis. And then since Coleyville, active threat training, right? That's why Rabbi Citron Walker said, without that training, he would not have gotten out alive. So as you can imagine, we were overwhelmed with requests to bring that training to on-site for particular schools, synagogues, JCCs, camps, you name it. And that's what you're going to be receiving tonight. So with that, let me turn things over to Seth Goodstein, retired lieutenant from NYPD.
Bear with me one moment, we get everything on. We can give you a link where you can see actually one of the presentations as well. And if someone reaches out to me individually, if you're with an institution, I can make slides available to you. So first, I also wanted to recognize the officers that are here from the 102 precinct tonight. Officer Simonetti, Officer Salomon, who's Community Affairs, and Officer Blattler, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce it wrong. Did I get it close enough? So both 2 NCOs, neighborhood coordination officers, and 1 in Community Affairs. So thank you all 3 for coming tonight. So these are some of your direct points of contact if you're within the 102 precinct, if that's where your facility is or where you live. The NCOs that cover your precinct, neighborhood coordination officers, to be your direct point of contact. So I encourage you afterwards, if you haven't met them already, to introduce yourselves and of course exchange cards or contact information. So today we're going to be talking about active threat incidents, how we respond to disasters and how to prepare for and respond to being trapped inside a building during an active threat event. We also learn steps to take to assist law enforcement and to limit casualties. So just to give you a little further background of who I am, as Mitch mentioned, I retired from the police department in 2010 as a lieutenant. After I retired from the police department, I went to work for Marriott International at several hotels in Manhattan. Most recently, I was the director of security at the St. Regis Hotel and the director of security at the New York Marriott Eastside Hotel. I'm board certified in security management and physical security from ASI International. And I've been with the Community Security Initiative since the inception. So Mitch mentions here, so we'll skip past this, what the community security initiative, but on the highest level, we're free security consultants for the Jewish community. So this presentation tonight is current as of tonight. This doesn't replace any training that you could potentially get from the New York City Police Department or other agencies as well. It's used to supplement that. There's no certification with this. There's no certificate that you'll receive afterwards. So I want to show you this quick video. And if you get nothing else out of tonight, if you're able to get the information from this, you've come out way better than you came in through the doors.
Most active shooter events are within 5 minutes, over 35% end in less than 2. They're rare, but they happen. When attending a mass gathering, scan for escape routes and other places that might provide protection. Pre-planning will shorten your reaction time and help overcome the tendency to freeze. Survival is tied to action. Run if you can. It makes you a harder target and puts distance between you and the attacker. Don't hesitate. Seconds matter. If running is too risky, hide in a secure place. Lock or barricade yourself in. Turn off the lights and silence phones. Then plan an attack strategy in case the shooter enters. Fighting is always your last resort, but if you must, empower yourself. Find something to use as a weapon and don't fight fair. First responders will be on the scene within minutes. Until then, it's up to you. Go to fbi.gov/survive to learn more.
So what are we going to look at this evening? So first, we're going to discuss some past attacks and look at what we can learn from these attacks for the future and hoping to mitigate something that or preventing something that occurs. We're going to talk about creating a culture of security at your institution. We're going to look specifically at some access control incidents that have occurred and why it's so important to control access to your facility. And the meat and potatoes tonight is really how we respond when an attack occurs. And lastly, looking at planning and training to help mitigate an attack. So Christopher Wray, after Colleyville, he met together with the Anti-Defamation League, and they gave a presentation to the Jewish community. And during this presentation, Director Wray talked about the best time to patch the roof is when it's sunny. So what did he mean by this? He meant develop those partnerships with law enforcement, CSI, other organizations that can provide an assistance prior to an event happening, and also prepare for these events before the incident happens. And what does that mean? It means training like this. It means drills. It means tabletop exercises, procedures, policies at your institution to make sure that as much as you possibly can, you can prepare to mitigate an attack if it, God forbid, ever occurs. So we look at some of the things to look at when we're talking about preparing for an attack, and we talk about things like situational awareness training, basic security awareness, that planning, applying for grants, which was mentioned by the Congresswoman. The grant is coming up very, very soon, and when it gets announced, it'll probably be a very quick turnaround to get your applications in. And then we look at what we're doing tonight, which is the active threat, active shooter response, and how we respond to that. So first, I want to just look at what an active attack is. So you can equate an active attack to an attempted mass murder, because that's what it is. The federal definition of what an active attack is, it doesn't have a number assigned to it. There's not a minimum amount of people that can be killed or injured. It talks about one or more people actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined and populated area. But it's much easier just to think of it as attempted mass murder. These events are over very quickly. They last from seconds to a few minutes. In this presentation, we're going to answer the question, what do I do? So learning from history, which is very important. And I want to see, sometimes this works and sometimes it doesn't. Let's see if it works. So these are incidents that occurred from 2000 to 2018. You see on the legend, I know it's a little small, but the yellow are gun events, knife is red, and vehicle attacks are in blue. The smaller of the circles are less than 4 people that were injured or killed, and larger are more than 4. And you can just see how exponentially it keeps on growing and growing and growing. And this only goes up to 2018. The reason I like to show this, I really like to give you an idea of how prevalent these types of attacks are. When we talk about the rarity and the possibility of something occurring. this map really helps us put it into perspective. So looking at some events that occurred. In December 14th, 2012, a perpetrator in Newtown, Connecticut at Sandy Hook Elementary School killed 26 people. 20 of the victims were children between the ages of 6 and 7 years old, and 6 were adult staff members. This attacker shot his way through a glass panel next to the locked front entrance door to the school. The doors were locked, the windows were not protected sufficiently. He was able to shoot in, break the glass, and walk right into the facility. Mitch mentioned Pittsburgh, 2018, the Tree of Life Synagogue shooting. In the Jewish community, this is kind of looked upon as like the 9/11 type of event for the Jewish community. Suspect entered through an open door into the synagogue, killed 11 people and wounded 6 others. And then once again, 2019, multiple events. Poway, California, perpetrator killed 1 woman, wounded 3 others, including the rabbi. In December in Jersey City, 3 people were killed in the JC Kosher Supermarket, and police detective Joseph Seals from the Jersey City Police Department was also killed when he confronted the suspects in the cemetery prior to the shooting at the supermarket. And then we had the Hanukkah shooting later in December at Muncie, New York. This was a classic example of an incident that was not an active shooter event. It was an active assailant event in which he used a large knife or a machete. 5 people were injured in the rabbi's home. 1 succumbed to their wounds a few months later and passed away. The party guests forced the assailant to flee by wielding chairs and a small table, which is very important to remember. And then we fast forward to more than a month ago now, almost going on 2 months now, to Texas, Colleyville, Texas. And this was a hostage taking. It wasn't an active attack, but it could have transitioned to an active attack at any point. You know, I thank God that it was a hostage taking and it wasn't an active attack, because if this person went in there with the sole purpose to kill, Rabbi and the 3 others would have been killed. And then who knows what would have happened after that. So the actions that you learned this evening to take and mitigate an active attack still applies in this incident. So the main focus here is, I don't fault the rabbi. Clergy it's ingrained upon clergy to help people. This person said he was, looking for someplace to be warm. The rabbi let him in. They gave him a cup of tea. At a certain point, he took out a firearm when they started services, and that's when he took hostages. So the key to take away from this is the rabbi opened the door, propped it open, and asked, "Can I help you?" Right there, it doesn't matter how good the door was, if it was locked, he just defeated any security you had. So people say, well, what should he have done? The best scenario would have been an intercom where he could see him from a distance where you're safe behind secure doors. At a minimum, talk to him through the glass. Could he take out a firearm at that point? Sure, but you're giving yourself some type of option. If he refused entry in, this person could have just as easily taken out the firearm and forced his way in, and the rabbi would have no time to do anything because the door was already open. So when we look at the culture of security in our organization, security doesn't have a beginning state and an end state. It's a steady state. So think of your favorite athlete or a musician that you know. Do they get good and stop practicing? No, they keep on practicing throughout their lives to maintain the skills that they have. Security is not a spectator sport. It requires the full involvement of everybody in the community. And it requires training, it requires practice to make sure when the day comes, you're able to rely a little bit on muscle memory to be able to act. And it won't be the first time you've thought about these things. So it's interesting because we saw a huge increase of requests for active assailant training right after Colleyville. Now it's starting to taper down. Not that we're not handling the requests, we're not getting as many requests as before. Further and further you get away from an incident, people get complacent, and until, God forbid, another incident occurs, you lose that momentum. So it's important not to. If you can you hold it to the end? Question? I don't want to make you forget. You got it? Okay, good. So I might answer your question as we go through. So when we look at security at your institution, we talk about a layered defense. We talk about law enforcement, your partnerships with law enforcement. We talk about securing your facility, hardening your doors, other protective features that you have, cameras, intrusion detection alarms, lighting, fencing, safe rooms, shelter-in-place locations, and so on. We talk about getting intelligence, whether it's, the police department informing you of something that's potentially occurring where you need to have heightened awareness, or it's through the Anti-Defamation League, or through the Community Security Initiative. And then, of course, how do you detect? Do you have security? Do you have someone who's monitoring the cameras during services or during the week? Do you look to other organizations like the Community Security Service, which is a partner organization of ours? They train synagogue volunteer members to do unarmed security at their institution. So it's important to, and if you're interested, let me know. I'll connect you with our partners there who can assist you further. So very important to have a planning team in your institution. Security committee, often that's what we hear. Very, very important to have people and representation from all individuals that are stakeholders in your congregation, the clergy, administration, maintenance staff, law enforcement, security personnel. We want to make sure that everyone has a stake and everybody should be involved in the planning and the security of your institution. So how do we prepare? We mentioned basic security awareness, situational awareness. That's something, Community Security Service does do, and they do it on Zoom as well. It's a situational awareness training, which complements nicely to the active assailant training as well. Looking at what the active attack response should be, and that's what we're going to look at this evening. And then other things you could do to respond to an incident, like learning first aid. Stop the bleed training from the American College of Surgeons teaches lay people how to stop traumatic bleeding, the use of tourniquets, the use of packing wounds, and so on. Why? Because they've learned that, especially in these active assailant incidents, it could be a long time before medical EMS is allowed into the location. And the police are not there, at least initially, to help law enforcement, to help people that are wounded. They're there, they have to stop that attacker first. That means they might step over people that are injured in order to get to the attacker. So it might call upon lay people to be able to save someone else's life. Stopping bleeding is a very preventable situation that you can prevent someone from dying from, as long as you're able to stop the bleeding until help can get there. So we'll talk briefly about communications. And within the facility, it's important to have communications. In a school, in a synagogue, a public address system, how does one part of the location know what's going on in the other part of the location? Two-way communication, walkie-talkies. How do we communicate with senior leaders and staff if an event occurs? How does security at the door, if you have security, communicate with people that are inside the sanctuary? How are we facilitating that? And of course, there are other ways like texting and WhatsApp and so on. And then we have the external communications, 911, of course. Anytime you have an emergency, your fastest response is to calling 911. But do you have the cell phone numbers of your neighborhood coordination officers? Do you know how to contact community affairs? So if you have something that you need to consult with them on, you have an ongoing problem, do you have the ability to reach out to them? Emails as well. And of course, how do we communicate with other people, other stakeholders? How do you communicate with parents? If an incident occurs in your school, how do you communicate with the parents to let them know what's going on when they start hearing it on the news that there's an incident there? It's important things to think about and plan for prior to anything that's occurring. So calling 911, which we mentioned, everybody can call 911. No matter what the policy is or procedure in your institution, everybody has the authority to call 911. So do you have other ways to communicate and get an emergency call out? Do you have panic alarms, hold up alarms, duress buttons inside your facility? If you can't get to a phone, is there another means to be able to contact the police? Does someone have their cell phones, whether it's Shabbat or not? The person who first called 911 in the Tree of Life Synagogue shooting was the rabbi at that location. Do you have a hardline phone in the sanctuary? Do you have in meeting rooms inside a school and so on? Do you have a way to call? And then, of course, we want to make sure you're testing your plan. You establish your plan. How are you testing it? How are you making sure that it's going to work when you need to? And key to this is, how does everybody know what to do and what will happen? So access control, what we learned after Texas, post-Colleyville, this was a door that was open. So access control is critical. Gaps in the procedure left the occupants more vulnerable to the attack because the rabbi opened the door to the facility. Do you have multiple ways, as I mentioned, to call 911? And of course, we want to prepare ahead of time to be quicker to react in an incident. So access control, 3 out of the 4 here, the perpetrator was able to kill because of access control. We talked about the getting into these locations and how the door was able to be opened. It was open, it was unlocked. In Hillel, Germany, in Yom Kippur 2019, this incident where a gunman tried to attack the synagogue, he was stopped by a decent door that was locked. He tried using homemade explosives. He tried shooting his way in. He was not able to gain access to the synagogue members that were inside praying. Unfortunately, he did kill a few individuals outside. They didn't happen to be Jewish. That doesn't matter. He was just looking for targets to kill. So screening people when they come into our location. We want to make sure we're not letting unauthorized people into our facility. So how do we do so? So I was at an institute this week and I went in and outside they had an intercom and I buzzed in and I had an appointment to come in, but I hit the buzzer. They didn't ask who I was. Saw a camera, or maybe they saw me, maybe they didn't know I'm coming. Maybe the person who knows me, what I look like, let me in. I went right in. When I got in, I had to go upstairs and I didn't know where to go. So I see a sign points to the main office. I go up there. I walk all the way across the hallway, passing high school students in their rooms to the receptionist. And once I get in front of her desk, she goes, "Hi, can I help you?" I said, "Are you expecting me?" She's like, "Who are you?" If I was, and I spoke to her afterwards, but if I was a bad actor, that's a bad scenario. So when we look to screen people, we look to divide them into 3 different buckets, right? The known unknown, and the unknown. So who are the known people that come into your sanctuary? The known people that come to your sanctuary are your members. If you have security, if you don't have security, 99.999% of the people, everybody's going to know when they walk in. You really need the least level of screening on those individuals, right? You know who they are. And then we have the known unknown. So who are the known unknown? You're having a bar mitzvah, you're having a offer, you're having a baby name, you're having an event. Someone is coming as a guest. How do we screen them? Are they on a list? Does security get a list? Are we able to make sure that we're giving them a little bit of the extra attention because we don't necessarily know who they are? And then you have the unknown. The unknown is that person in Colleyville that comes to the door. Someone who wants to come, no one knows who this person is. How are you screening that person from a safe location to make sure that you're able to give the attention it needs to make sure that someone who's unauthorized doesn't come into your location and potentially hurt someone? So I talk, and I mentioned this a couple of times, but going with your gut instinct. When the hair on the back of your neck stands up, listen to it. Listen to it. We'll talk more about what that means. You know, when we screen people, we want to, in modern society, it's tough to ignore our feelings. Everybody wants to be nice. They don't want to appear rude and sensitive and so on and so forth. So we have to be cognizant of that. But you need to put your security first as well and do it in a balancing way to make sure that you're able to do that effectively. And then we talk about striking that balance. How do we do that? We want to be warm and welcoming, whether we're a school, whether we're a synagogue, another house of worship, and we want to be able to be safe. When they do these different surveys at different institutions and they're interviewing members and congregants and worshipers, and they say, go through the list, feeling of safety and security is very high on people's list. So what does that mean? It means it comes with minor inconveniences to make sure that we're establishing that. So people, because of things that have been going on, are a lot more easygoing about accepting some of these minor inconveniences as they're entering different buildings because they want to feel safe and secure. So Department of Homeland Security, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Bureau, they put out a flyer called The Power of Hello. And it talks about challenging people in a nice way by saying hello. So in the hotel industry, we call this aggressive hospitality. What does it mean? It means when security's in the hotel in Manhattan and someone walks in, you say to the person, "Hi, can I help you?" Good chance of the part of the time, 99% of the time, "Yeah, I'm checking in. Can you tell me where the front desk?" "Absolutely. Let me walk you over there." You just did your job. You helped out a guest. You brought them where they need to be. But what else did you do? That other person who's looking to come in and sneak up in the elevator and go into a room that a housekeeper was cleaning and steal from that guest, If they get challenged, hi, can I help you? Oh, I'm just looking for your restroom. I'm sorry, we don't have a public restroom. Okay, no problem. They want to go and be anonymous. They want to walk into a location and not be seen. I can't tell you how many times I do this when I go into an institution. If I'm able to walk right in and I have an appointment, I want to see, does anybody ask me, can I help you? I shouldn't have been able to get in, but I did. Countless amount of times, people just walk right by me. They don't know who I am. Ask, can I help you? I walked into the facility tonight. Walked by people. Not one person asked, can I help you? We want to make sure we're being proactive. We're taking that extra step. If someone is in there, challenge them. Make sure you're doing these different things. So let's look at how we react to an attack, and specifically what you should do, what your options are. But first, I want to talk a little bit about who the attacker is. So this is someone, there's really no profile. They range in age from young to senior citizens. Most are male, but there have been some that have been female. They come from all races. They have a mindset of someone who's deliberate, focused, detached. They could be a bully mindset. Some of them broadcast their intentions prior. Some don't. Some put it on social media. Some like to put a camera on their head when they're doing it and actually film themselves killing people. Many kill themselves when they're confronted by the police, but not all of them. So when we look at survivability and what it's directly related to, we talk about how quickly the police respond. The national average for the police to respond to an incident is about 3 minutes. But that varies, and I don't want you to get stuck on that time, because the reality is 3 minutes in an active assailant event could be a lifetime. And 3 minutes could be different if there's traffic, what side of the precinct they're coming from. In rural areas, urban areas, and so on, these things factor in. So if an incident that occurs is the start time is X and law enforcement response time is Y, you need to do everything that you can in between that to make sure that you're not injured, not hurt, and surviving until law enforcement can get there. So we also look at what else is it related to, target availability. If a person comes in and you're able to, first of all, if they can't get into your facility like they in Hallel, Germany, you're limiting target availability. That person doesn't have people to kill. Same thing inside the building. Person gets in and you're able to lock out the room that you're in. Lock down inside the building. You're able to go to an area of a refuge, a shelter-in-place location, fortify the doors. If you don't have those things in place, you're able to lock a door, you're able to barricade it, and so on. We're going to talk about some of those options. You're denying them the availability of targets to kill them. So I want to talk briefly about how we respond to disasters. It's important to think about this and understand it when we have an incident occurs, because it'll help you. And we talk about, and a lot of research has been done on this, 3 stages of the disaster response: denial, deliberation, and decisive action. So, for instance, in the World Trade Center, when the planes hit, some people called others to check with them as to what to do, logged off their computers, packed up their things before evacuating from the location. So why do people do this? So there's a couple of reasons. One is something called normalcy bias. People want an incident to conform to something normal that their brain can understand. For instance, if you hear shots, your brain might automatically say, was that fireworks? Because that's something you could understand. But then when you think about it rationally and say it's the middle of March, why would I hear fireworks outside or inside of a building? Your brain wants to process it that way, and that could delay and be in that denial phase and delay yourself taking action. The second thing is social proof. We watch for other people as to what to do. We want to know what to do. You could be in a situation, someone will hear something and they're looking around to see is anybody else doing anything. So I did a presentation the other day, and one of the attendees says, you remember that shooting that took place at the Stop and Shop in West Hempstead? You remember that? Stop and Shop West Hempstead last summer? Employee went in and killed his boss, shots fired inside the location, people ran and so on and so forth, and he was on the run. It happened very close to the West Hempstead Jewish community, although there was no direct threat there. So that type of an incident, this woman in my presentation says, I received a phone call with my friend. She said, I was just in the Stop and Shop in West Hempstead and I heard a loud noise. It sounded like could have been shots. And I saw an exit and I ran out. But I don't know if anything's going on. Should I go back in? She said, absolutely not. Don't go back in. And we still didn't know what was going on. But she took the action that she felt she should, and she made a decision right away. We'll talk about how that happens. She didn't deny. She listened to what was going on and she acted upon it. What's the worst scenario? It was a rack falling down, nothing happened. No one ever died of embarrassment.
Power on.
It likes to go off when it's not used for a while. It automatically shuts down, but that should have been louder. So I'm going to do it again. So that should have startled you when it happened the first time, but because it went over there, you lost that momentum. But it's designed to startle you. I want you to really think about it. So you hear something that sounds like gunshot, don't deny. You want to go right to the deliberation phase. If you ran out of a building because it turned out it was not gunshots, so what? So what? Everybody's safe. If it turns out it was, you'll be thanking yourself that you were able to get out of that location. So we want to get out of that phase as quickly as possibly can, and we want to go into the deliberation phase. This is where we decide, what are we going to do? Are we going to run? Are we going to hide? Are we going to fight? And I say hide, but I want to clarify that when we get into hide a little bit more, because it's really not hide. It's more involved than that. So show you a quick video.
Gunshot. Mid screams and commotion of the, they quickly focused on a man wielding an AK-47. Almost instantly, one of them said, "Let's go," and the three ran toward the shooter. Those three friends are with us here today. Thank you, Alec, Spencer, and Anthony, for what you did on that train and for joining us here. And that's because after Alec said, "Let's go," he and Spencer and Anthony sprinted toward the gunman while he trained his rifle on them. Spencer tackled the assailant and the three worked to disarm him. As we know, Spencer was stabbed in that effort. After they knocked out the gunman, they tended to other injured on board before paramedics and police arrived.
So everyone remember that incident in Paris? The movie they made was, I think, 15, 18 Train to Paris. They acted in the movie and went through which is incredible that they were able to do that, because to me, I think reliving that wouldn't be fun. But they cycled through the stages very, very quickly, from right out of denial, right to deliberation, right to that decisive action very quickly. The research shows people that are able to cycle through those stages quickly and get to that decisive action quicker are more likely to survive an incident. So I want to look at stress. And what happens to your body when it goes through a stressful incident? As a stressful incident occurs, especially a life-threatening incident, our heart rate will go up. As it goes up from that normal resting rate that's in white, we get to yellow, where your fine motor skills can start to deteriorate. Things that were once very easy before become more difficult. Condition red, you have complex motor skills start to deteriorate, but peak physical performance is gross motor, and you have more blood going to your muscles. You'll actually bleed less if you're injured, and so on. As you get further up in the continuum, you start getting into that tunnel vision, that auditory exclusion, and when you finally get to black, everything shuts down. Your bowels could void, you could urinate, and so on and so forth, and it's a natural body reaction when you get to that stress level and so on. So we talk about, and why am I telling you this? It's important to keep your level as low as possible for as long as you can, to keep your brain functioning as normal as it can, because you're able to make better decisions and know what to do. So this is from January 9th, 2015, the kosher supermarket in Paris, France. And a gunman went in and he killed people in this location. But I want to show you this video from inside when the gunman enters. And you'll notice the length of time it takes the female with the stroller to remove the child from it. This is a task that she's probably done a dozen times a day. She's unable to do it. She's unable to clip the harness, and she eventually gets the child out just by brute force. Also take a look at people that are bumping into each other, bouncing into each other, and then people that are looking to hide in plain sight. So what can you do? So there are techniques you can do to try to calm yourself when you're in this type of stressful situation. I'm not going to say it's easy, but trying to actually deliberately calm yourself. Breathing techniques. Breathing in through your nose, holding it at the top for 2 seconds, letting it out through your mouth, holding it at the bottom for 2 seconds. It's been shown that a technique like that can lower your heart rate 20 to 30 beats per minute. So what does that do? It brings you into that lower threshold of a stress level and has you control your movements in your body and your brain functioning to a more of a normal basis longer. Staying fit. People that are in good shape, it's been shown that they can survive handle stressful incidents better than others. We talk about shifting your emotion from fear to anger. Anger is a much more useful emotion when you're in a life and death type of a situation. And then we talk about practicing. We talk about training and then practicing and knowing what to do in a situation and going through that. So this could be anywhere, right? You're in your office, you should know what to do and what you actually will take if someone came in and decided to attack. And it doesn't mean you sit in your office all day long and you sit in the sanctuary and instead of praying, you're thinking about what to do if an attacker comes in. Just think about what to do in those locations and have an idea. Okay, if someone did come in through that door, where's my exit? Can I get out? What can I use here to help defend myself? And have that plan and think about it no matter where you are. You know, when I go through the mall with my kids, I'll turn around as we're walking and say, where's the exits? I want them to know what we came in over there. No, where's the emergency exits? In the movie theater. First thing I do, I want to know where the exits are in the movie theater. So in deliberation, you want to commit to action. You're deciding what to do, run, hide, or fight. No matter what, if you're people that are placed on under enough stress, your brain is eventually going to shut down. But one of the great things with our brains is that you can train it ahead of time to be able to handle a stressful situation when you're not under stress. And it'll help you do a better job when that incident does occur. So what are the options that you can do? We're going to talk about the first one, which is run. And what does that mean? It means get out of there as soon as you can, knowing where your exits are, calling 911 when you're safe. When someone comes through the door, the first thing shouldn't be picking up the phone. That's not going to help you survive the incident because it takes time for the police to get there. You need to take action before that. This is another video from the kosher supermarket in Paris, France. And I want you to see once the gunman enters the front of the store, not only do you see two patrons that run out of the store, but you see people on the street nearby also running from the location as well. And knowing your exits, making sure your congregants, making sure the students in the school know where their exits are. When you check into a hotel, how many people look at this sign on the back of your door to know where your exits are? And I'm not talking about necessarily for an active shooter at a hotel, although that has happened. I'm talking more for the fact of there's a fire and you need to get out. Do you plan ahead? I bring a flashlight with me to the movie theater. I want to make sure that I'm able to see when everything's dark and all hell is breaking loose that I can still get out. The flashlight on your phone is not going to do it. So preparing ahead of time to make sure, and it's a simple little thing to throw into my pocket, into a pocketbook, whatever it might be, into your coat jacket, so at least you have it. When you're looking to prepare for the exits, make them as easy as you possibly can. And make sure people realize that the closest exit, just like on an airplane, might not be in front of them, it could be behind them. Most people will come in the exit. If something happened here tonight without training, most people will go right out the exit you came in. You wouldn't think about the other exits that you see where exit signs are as a way to get out. And don't limit yourself to doors. So this door here, this is a still shot, not the video, but the person on the floor here, they actually pushed on top and below the panic push bar. So we don't even really know if that door was actually locked or not. They didn't hit the push bar. Why? That stress level, right? Your brain is not functioning as normal as it used to when you're not under stress. So you want to look for other ways to get out as well. Could you use this ladder and go up to the roof if that's where it goes to? Sure. You need to think of other ways to be able to know where to go and what to do. And it doesn't have to always be those usual doors. So a couple of things we'll point out here, and I'll do that in a couple other slides, but you'll see this again. Remember, under stress, the simple things are not simple anymore. So I want to talk about hiding. And we talk about when you're hiding, a locked door means a lot. Behind the locked door, lights being out, so it doesn't look like anybody's in there, and staying out of sight from that shooter. We're going to talk a little bit more about what it means to stay out of sight and where we would actually suggest everybody stays. But when I talk about hiding, I like to clarify it because it's really, hiding like this is hiding and hoping. Nothing's going to stop the individual when he comes around the desk and he shoots you. There's nothing to prevent it. Hiding in a barricaded location, in a location that's a locked door where you could actually fortify yourself. The heavier, the better, the more items, the better. Door stops, simple door stops wedged under a door that opens in can be effective in delaying or preventing that door from opening on doors that open in, not going out. There's other ways with doors that go out. But it's not just hiding and hoping. It's hiding, barricading, and you're getting ready for potentially the next option that you might have to incorporate. So remember, you want to be active in your denial of the suspect. So here, this door remained open. They didn't pull this out to close it. Could this door have locked? We don't know. They had other things here that they could have looked to put in front of the door and barricade it. Putting it, the fear is set in here and she has her hands over her eyes. That's not going to protect her. At the end of the day, it's not going to stop someone from hurting you. When we look at doors that open out, there are other ways to try and hold tension to be able to keep that door from opening. So this video, this is Caitlin Rowick. Caitlin Rowick was a school teacher at Sandy Hook Elementary School. She was able to save kids in her room, and this is an interview that she did with Diane Sawyer. Her perspective as a teacher, what the students were doing, and responding to law enforcement, how she responded when they finally came into the room.
That all day we have met people who remind us what teachers do, how much they care, even in the face of terror. And I sat down with a first grade teacher at that school, Caitlin Rowick. She heard gunfire, large windows exposed her classroom. So she managed to rush 15 small children into a tiny bathroom to try to save their lives.
I put one of my students on top of the toilet dispenser. I just knew we had to get in there. I was just telling them it's going to be okay. You're going to be all right. I had pulled a bookshelf before I closed the door in front of it. So it was we were completely barricaded in. I turned the lights off.
Did you tell them to be quiet? Did you worry about one of them?
No, I told them to be quiet. I told them we had to be absolutely quiet because I was just so afraid that if he did come in and then he would hear us and then he would maybe just start shooting the door. So I said, no, we just have to be absolutely quiet. And I said, there are bad guys out there now. We need to wait for the good guy. And oh my God. I wanted us to be okay. And I'm so saddened that there are people who in this situation are not okay. And my heart goes out to anyone who knew them and was part of their lives. I just can't imagine.
Did they cry?
No, if they started crying, I would take their face and say, it's gonna be okay. Show me your smile. I really tried to and one of my students would say things like, I know karate, so it's okay. I'll lead the way out.
They really said they really want to go home for Christmas.
Yeah. No, I just want to hug my mom. Or just, things like that were just heartbreaking, and in my mind, because you're hearing, I've never been a part of something, obviously, anywhere near this traumatic. And so I'm hearing the gunfire in the hallway and I'm thinking in my mind, I'm the first classroom. Why isn't he coming? I'm thinking we're next. And, and in my mind, I'm thinking, as as a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, what are your thoughts? What are your, and I'm thinking that I have to almost be their parent. Like I have to tell them, so I said to them, I need you to know that I love you all very much and that it's going to be okay. Because I thought that was the last thing they were ever going to hear. I thought we were all going to die. And I don't know if that's okay, teachers and, but I wanted them to know someone loved them. And I wanted that to be one of the last things they heard. Not the gunfire in the hallway. It's so horrible. Horrible.
How did you know you were going to be okay? What
I
happened?
didn't. What finally happened was the gunfire stopped. The gunfire wasn't that long. So that stopped, but I said, no, we're not going anywhere. We're staying here until someone good comes in, gets us out. So eventually what happened was the police came and started knocking. And obviously, I was completely beside myself. And I said, I don't believe you. You need to put your badges under the door. So they put their badges under the door. I said, if you're really a police officer, then you would have a way to get in here. You would have a key or you would have gotten it from the janitor. If everything's okay now, you would have found the keys. So he had the keys and he found the right one and he unlocked the door. And then they brought us out to the firehouse to meet up with the rest of the teachers and students waiting for parents to come and pick them up.
I think there are a lot of people who wish.
So this is back at the kosher supermarket in Paris. And when the gunman comes in, I want you to look what this gentleman does. He looks for alternatives. He grabs what appears to be a bottle of wine and he grabs it and he's ready to fight. And he starts heading to the front of the store. He later decides that running is a better answer and he runs out the back door. He's able to get out safely. In contrast, I want you to look at the woman in the blue shirt who is using the playing dead tactic. That's a flawed tactic. You basically gave up at that point. It's not going to work. The gunman's not going to see you not moving and say, okay, I'm not going to shoot you. So he cycled through those 3 stages very quickly. He got past, he went right to that decisive action very quickly. He said, someone's coming in here. He shifted whatever fear he had, he went right to anger. Okay, he cycled through that very, very quickly. And I don't know whether it would work, whether it would not work, and so on, but he made another decision and it changed. So the question here is, when someone comes in and say you're barricading yourself inside of a location, you get into a room, you lock the door. So where do you stand? Where do you stand? So you're in a room, this room. We're in this room and we lock those doors. The gunman's outside there. We lock the doors. We throw all the chairs on top of it. Where should you stand inside the room? So without putting anybody on the spot, how many people by raising their hands think you should stand as far away from the door as you possibly can? Okay, stand, far away, can't be seen. You don't want to be seen, right? We know that. How many people think you should stand very close to the door? Anybody willing to say why they think they should stand close to the door?
You get prepared if the guy does come in, you might be able to.
Correct. If you're all the way across the room and a gunman comes in, you're never going to get to that gunman to be able to get to that fight stage and defend your life before they shoot you. Even with a knife, it's the same thing. Someone can get to you with a knife. If you're near the door's barricaded. I'm not saying in front of the door, off to the side at a safer location. If he comes in, he comes in, multiple, you have the ability, more people, the better. Grab the gun, grab the muzzle of the gun, point it away from you, point it to the ceiling, whatever you need to do, and you want to control that firearm and then control the person. Now remember, this is the last-ditch effort to survive. You need to do everything possible to be able to survive. And this is not a fair fight. This doesn't mean that we can't, you want to gouge eyes, pull hair, scratch, bite, kick, whatever you need to do to survive. This isn't a fair fight, okay? If you can get, person walks in with the gun scenario, grab the gun, aim it away. Obviously, there's more people to assist. Hold the question, I'll get to it after too. Don't forget it either, okay? So this is Lieutenant Brian Murphy from the Oak Creek Police Department in Wisconsin. In 2012, a gunman entered the Sikh temple and killed 6 people at that location. Lieutenant was one of the first to respond on the scene. He was shot 15 times. So when he was lying on the pavement, bleeding, he said to himself, I'm not going out in a parking lot. I'm not going out like this. I'm not going to let my wife down. I'm not going to let my daughter down. I'm not letting my stepkids down. He survived. And this is about mindset. The point here is that just because you're shot doesn't mean that you're going to die. And just because, you're watching a movie, someone gets shot, they go down to the ground. Just because you're shot doesn't mean that you're going to die. Even if you can't move anymore, just think angry thoughts until help can get to you. It's about mindset to keep yourself alive until the help can get to you. He was saved, his fellow officer was able to get to him, and he just retired not too long ago. So you're fighting as if your life depends on it, because it does. So in Colleyville, Rabbi Citron Walker, he threw a chair to save himself and the other hostages. So throughout the event, he was inching more towards the emergency exit. He saw an opportunity when the gunman took a drink, he threw a chair at him, and they were able to exit out the door. If you watch the video, you can see 3 of them exit. One was actually let out earlier in the evening, and then you see the gunman with the gun in hand come out after him. He sees the police, he ducks back in, FBI goes in, and he's shot dead. So in Muncie, as we mentioned before, it was the party guests that forced the person to flee by taking chairs and tables and throwing them at the gunman, the knife wielding perpetrator, in order to get him to leave the location. So you got to consider what you have to fight with. Prayer books, chairs, tables, whatever you have, and you want to look for these in your location where you are in the synagogue. What could we use if we had to fight to defend our lives? So we just, I touched on this. What do you have in this room here? We know we have chairs, we have tables. There might be other things around that we can use, the computer, this heavy speaker, whatever we need to try to defend ourselves to, if someone came into this location and you had to go right to that fighting stage. What can you do in this location to barricade the door? Same thing. But the question is, do these doors lock? These doors don't lock. So it's an issue. So if you're in a location where the doors don't lock, that's one of the things that we talked about earlier, changing things in the institution to make sure you have a way to safely protect yourself inside that facility. First outside, we don't want them in, they get in. How do we now have secondary layers inside our institution to make sure we have a place where we can go and barricade and wait for law enforcement to arrive safely? Remember, what you do matters. You're buying time for law enforcement to arrive. So I want to look at briefly some of the things that happened at Virginia Tech in 2010 at the shooting that occurred on the morning of April 16th, 2007. 32 people died at the hands of a mass shooter at Virginia Polytechnic Institute. So in this instance, we looked at Norris Hall where the shootings occurred. And the first room that the suspect went into was room 206. The red squares are students that were killed or teachers. Yellow were injured, green were not injured. So the suspect first entered room 206. This is where the shooting started. The shooter walked in and started killing people. He left and returned later to shoot more. In room 207, the second room that the shooter attacked, the shooter walked in and shot several students and the teacher. He then walked down the aisles shooting students. The shooter left. The shooter attempted to return, but the students used their bodies to barricade the door. The shooter was able to just get the door open 1 inch. He also fired several shots into the doorknob area. No one was hit by these shots. Then we have room 211. 211, the teacher heard the shots and she immediately told the student, call 911. The students attempted to block the door with a desk. The shooter pushed his way in. Shooter pushed his way in and shot the professor, and he walked down the aisle, killing the students. He later returned and shot more students. In room 204, this is Professor Livu Labresco's room. Professor Labresco was a Holocaust survivor. He heard the shots and he held the door shut when the shooter tried to enter. He yelled for his students to jump out the windows. This was on the second floor. The shooter shot Labresco through the door, killing him. 10 students made it out of the window before the shooter got in. 2 more were shot trying to get out, both survived. Of the 6 who did not get out, 4 were shot and 1 of those students died. In Route 205, these students heard the shots and they used their feet to keep the door closed. They laid down on the floor and used their feet to keep the door closed. The shooter pushed on and he fired through the door, but he never gained entry. He wasn't thinking I should shoot down at the ground. He was shooting directly through the door. He wants to have that target availability. No one was injured or killed inside that room.
When he came into the class, I think he had a pretty well planned out system of how he would kill everybody. He shot the professor first and then shot whoever was closest to him. The gunman was probably about 6 feet away from me. The first thing I looked at was the Glock, and the second thing I looked at was his face. There was almost just this sort of emptiness in his face. Like you can look into somebody's eyes and sort of see like their expressions and how they're feeling. But with his, it wasn't really anger. It was just more methodical. Like he was determined to do something. He was here for a reason, and he was going to try and kill as many of us as he could. He made eye contact with me, and I was looking down pretty much the barrel of his gun. It was slow motion in my mind, but in all, it probably was less than like 3 seconds that I had to react. I saw the bullet come out, and at that point, like I slid under my desk, so I thought I was safe, but the bullet went through my arm. I sort of scrambled for the back of the room. I put as much sort of desk and objects in the way of him and me as I could. And then after that, he walked into the other side of the room. Not running, not sprinting, just calm, methodical, and then shot all of the people over there.
So what does law enforcement do? That was one of the survivors from Virginia Tech, by the way. The point that he was shot, survived. Says shows you a little bit of how the shooter came in and what his mindset as he was going through. So law enforcement arrives. What's their job? Their job is to stop the killing, stop the dying. After that's accomplished, then they'll evacuate the injured, but not before that. They have to stop this person from causing any more injury and death. So when the police arrive, it's very important, follow all the commands of law enforcement. Show them your palms. You don't want to have anything in your hand. You don't want to have a cell phone or water bottle, whatever it is, empty hands, and follow their directions exactly. You might get handcuffed, go with it. It's going to be sorted out afterwards. The idea is that you don't want to be injured when you just survived this incident because you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. Remember, the officers are going through the same stress levels that you're going through. They have different training and so on, but remember, their stress levels are high as well. So you have to keep that in mind and make it as easy as possible for them when they arrive on scene. EMS is going to be delayed. They're not coming in until it's safe. So what does that mean? It means that it might be your job to help save a life. And that's when we talk about, again, stop the bleed training and how to stop traumatic bleeding. It's a 1-hour training. It's very easy to do and learn how to do it. Practice with tourniquets. Get these kits inside your institutions, tourniquets, gauze that come inside these kits to pack wounds and so on to try to prevent someone from bleeding out. And what happens post-incident? So post-incident, you need to expect you're going to have PTSD. You're going to have people that have survivor's guilt. As an organizational standpoint, you need to prepare for this and how you're going to handle this with faculty, congregants, staff members, children after the incident. What do you have in place if, God forbid, you ever need to, as far as counseling and so on? What type of plan do you have for critical incident stress management? How are you going to handle reunification? Whether, and they met at a firehouse in Newtown, Connecticut, and the parents were directed there. I talk about in my synagogue, if we tell people on the high holy days when we have the most people there, the children are babysitting or junior congregation, we have people that are designated if we need to evacuate the building to go down and communicate with them, or at least over the radio that the babysitters have. We tell the parents, don't go down to the babysitting room. Kids aren't going to be there. They're being brought to such and such location. That's where you need to go to reunite with your children. These are things to look at in advance. And depending on how it is, you'll be able to communicate that. Crisis communications, how are you communicating with other people in the institution when the incident occurs and after it occurs. Who's in this chain of crisis communication to be able to be contacted? And then, of course, the continuity of operations. How do you handle business at your location, whether it's a synagogue, a school, or another institution, when you can't get in there for 2 weeks because it's a crime scene? Do you have your computer files and your contact information and things that you need that are necessary to run your business entity offsite? Do you have the ability to do so? And I'll put that in very simple terms. Hurricane Sandy, power went out, everybody lost power. We wanted to check on individuals at the synagogue, homebound people, people that were elderly, making sure they're okay. We didn't have cell phones. It's in the synagogue, in the computer. After that, we made sure we had these lists available for key members of administration in the synagogue to make sure they're able to do so. And then you divide it out about people to do it. You'll notice during this presentation today that I don't mention any of the names of any of the shooters, and this is done intentionally. So we know that some of the shooters are motivated by a desire for fame and notoriety. They were nothings in their lives, and committing mass murder is a way for them to become something. Why give them this? Why not take away at least part of their motivation? They deserve to be as anonymous in death as they were in life, and it's the victims that deserve to be remembered. And with that in mind, this was Victoria Soto. Victoria Soto was a first grade teacher at Sandy Hook Elementary School. On the day that that monster came into the school to murder as many kids as he could, she put herself between the monster and her kids. Her classroom was where some of the kids survived. She gave her life to protect them. Soto had hidden several children in the closet, and when the perpetrator entered her classroom, Soto told him that the children were not there and that they were in the school gym. A few of the children got scared at that point and they ran from their hiding place, and the perpetrator began shooting at the students. Soto was reportedly shot trying to shield them with her body. This is Angela McQueen, who was a physical education and math teacher in Mattoon, Illinois. So when she was faced with a student shooter inside the cafeteria, she immediately ran and tackled that shooter, taking him down to the ground, and she held him there until the police arrived. He did get a shot off, raised one student, another one got hit in the chest, both survived, but she was able to immediately cycle very quickly through those 3 stages of that response. She moved right to deliberation and right to that decisive action immediately, and she saved lives. So this is going to sum everything up. And this is a very good video that really talks about everything that we spoke about. It really puts it into perspective.
Hi, can I get you started with drinks?
Oh, I'm sorry, I gotta take this.
We'll need a minute.
Back up! You can't be here anymore! Get out of my face! What, you think I'm afraid of you? Get off! 911, there's a
Running makes you harder to hit. It improves your chances of survival. Don't go up here. Police, where is he? By the bar, blue jeans, black shirt. Empty hands up, follow their instructions. I'm in a direct line of fire if I head for either exit, but I have other options to help me survive. Guys, come on, in here. Go, go, go. Lock and barricade the door.
Both my exits are blocked by the shooter. I gotta stay hidden. I'm no victim. I'm ready for this.
He's applying direct pressure to the wound to stop the bleeding until we can find a tourniquet. In the meantime, turn off your phones and make a plan to defend yourself.
We have to fight to survive. If they control the weapon, they control the shooter. I'll go for the gun. He'll go for his arms. The bartender will go for the head.
Those are another 30 seconds, but apparently my internet signal is, but you get the gist of that. So a couple things. You can subscribe to our mailing list, which I can give you the link for. If you go to jcrc.org, go to security, and you can access it there as well. You could apply for your institution if you haven't already for physical or cyber assessment. We do have a cyber security consultant that works with us as well. But developing a security plan, having a plan in place, because I can tell you, majority of institutions, they don't have an active shooter plan. You should have a plan for all hazards. But specifically here, we're talking about active shooter, active assailant. You need to have a plan in place as to what to do. Now, these are dynamic situations, right? It's not always going to say, I can't come in here and say, every incident you're going to run, every incident you're going to hide, you're going to barricade. This is what you do. You're going to, you need to fight immediately. I can't tell you that. Every situation is going to be different. The best scenario is to get as far away as you possibly can, but that might not be an option. If the attacker is on the outside of this building and you're secure inside this building, the best place is not running outside potentially, right? It's to stay in here, barricaded, locked in, locked down, and so on, right? So these are things that always have to be factored in as we go through it. Looking to harden your facility through the availability of grant funds or outside of grant funds, looking to change the infrastructure to make sure it's harder for someone to get inside and have plans in place to be able to know what to do. We mentioned a little bit of having plans off-site, having plans available to law enforcement, and of course, constant training to make sure. This is one step. This shouldn't be the one and done here, and this is the only thing you can do in your institution, even if you bring this back and we have this specifically for your location. There's other things that need to be done. So when we look at what we spoke about today, we talked about creating that culture of security within your institution, how it's everybody's responsibility. But we also mentioned about striking a balance between being warm and welcoming and safe and secure. How do we stop people from, unauthorized people from getting into our location, knowing where to go, where the exits are? What are the options in case an active assailant comes in? Run, hide, and fight. And make plans to identify communications and channels and secure equipment. And finally, being prepared to fight like your life depends on it, because it very well may depend on it. So this training is based on training called CRAZE, which is a national law enforcement training for civilians. It's civilian response to active shooter events from Texas A&M. And with that, I'll take any, I know you had the first question.
So my question was, how do you balance being warm and welcoming at a synagogue? You don't know who's going to be coming in. And you can't just always keep the door locked because someone's going to want to come in and you can't get in.
Okay, why can't you keep it locked? What's the obstacle to keeping it locked? And I'll tell you the solution.
Also, keeping it locked is a stranger may want to come in.
Right.
Who is not a member of the congregation. He may not know the passcode.
Right.
And he wants to come in and pray. You can't get in.
Absolutely. So it's a problem, right? How do we counter that problem? So we counter that with, first of all, you could do a combination of technology, but more importantly is procedures. If you have a door where your congregants are able to get in, they have that passcode, which by the way, isn't the greatest, but you're doing the best you can, right? With the push button mechanical, for Shabbat, we can't use electronics, so we understand that. So you do the best you can. However, someone comes in, hey, I'm just visiting, I'd like to come in and dog it, I don't have the passcode. That person needs to be screened. They shouldn't just be able to walk into the synagogue without being screened first. The door should remain locked. So what does that mean? Just like in Texas, it shouldn't mean opening the door saying, hi, can I help you? There should be another way to do so. Whether it's even talking to the person through the glass, through the door, to be able to determine what it is. If we can incorporate technology in accordance with your level of observancy, to have a monitor, to have a way to be able to see who's out there from a safe location would be the best scenario.
The people inside the synagogue, been after the years, it's not at the door.
So it's time to enlist the members of the congregation. If you have security, great. We let them do that and we have them contract security, we hire people. If we don't, maybe it's time to get members of the congregation as volunteers, a member rotating every half hour on the door. Hey, you get the first half hour to screen and let people in. Because I'll tell you one step even further. Not only should that person not be able to get in your exterior door, now you go to the sanctuary and there's another set of doors. That person, an unauthorized person, should not be able to get in that second set of door without properly being screened. So what does that do? If that first door, that person breaches it, you have a secondary door that's locked immediately. That doesn't first have to be locked, because in the seconds it takes you to lock that door, the person could already be in. If it's already locked, it's one less step you have to do in an emergency. Listen, this is all inconvenient. It's not fun. You have to get volunteers to do it, but there are ways to do it inexpensively through personnel to be able to start screening people. CSS, the Community Security Service, excellent organization to be able to have them speak to you. Have them come in and do the entry point training, which is situational awareness, and then explore the possibility of, hey, maybe we can get 10 volunteers in our congregation to be our CSS security team and conduct unarmed security. And then they'll be involved in this aspect of what we're talking about to make the institution stronger. The bottom line is nobody in this day and age should be able to walk into your location through an unlocked door anymore. Can't do it. You just can't do it. If you do having it open, you have that risk, inherent risk of something happening because there's nothing stopping that individual come in. Now, we talk about the power of hello. So say, okay, hey, no matter what, we're not leaving that door locked. Okay, that's you. Listen, it's your institution. It's the choice of the people there. And I know it's not usually one person making those decisions, right? Nonetheless, so someone comes in and there's someone that walks in, this person, there has to be mechanisms in place to say, hi, can I help you? Oh yeah, I'm here. Okay. And be able to assess the individual. If the person's walking in ripped jeans and a ripped shirt and, dressed inappropriately for Shabbat or a holiday, that's a clue that maybe something's wrong here. Something is not, is amiss in the situation. High Holy Days last year, standing in front of my synagogue, car drives up and the individual speaks to the crossing guard who's outside from the police department and drives off. Crossing guard thought there was something not right. She came up to me. I happened to be talking to the police department there, who happened to have been on site. She says, listen, this guy, he was wearing ripped jeans and a t-shirt. He says he's here for services. It's the High Holy Days, right? Okay, the officer sees him pull around the corner. He goes and he approaches him. The person, he interviews him, speaks to him. Person, oh, I'm here for services. Well, do you have tickets? Did you, speak to someone in advance? No, I always go to synagogues. They let me in all the time. Okay, well, that's the first clue because that's rarely happening anymore, right? You could just walk in, especially on the High Holy Days, conservative synagogue too, right? So they're giving out the tickets and so on ahead of time and so on. So the officer spoke to him, got his license plate ready, everything was fine. It worked out. Who knows what the story was, but they were recognizing something was wrong. These are things that have to be done. How are we screening those unknown individuals out of those three categories that are coming into our institution? Has to put mechanisms in place. I hate going to an institution and I could walk in and I'm standing in front of the office or I'm standing in front of the rabbi or in services, and that's the first time that you're interviewing. Tree Life Synagogue was one of my worst fears from my own synagogue. You were able to come in the back door, that we had no security. I couldn't get them to pay for security. They're like, we don't have the money. We don't have the money. Like many institutions, right? We don't have it. My biggest fear was what happened in Tree Life. The first time we're going to know that there's an active shooter is when he's in the sanctuary and he's shooting. No good. The next week we had armed security. We put a surcharge on dues. We managed to do it. We found the money from somewhere else. When institutions start thinking about security, like they start thinking about the HVAC, that's when you get things done as well. If the boiler goes out, oh, we got to fix it. Same thing with security. If you have these gaps, you need to think of it similar to that as well. I hope that answers your question, but procedurally, and I'm happy to talk offline about it another time a little further, procedurally, get people, everybody's responsibility for security. It's not just administration, it's not just paid staff inside anymore. Everybody's got to take that responsibility. You had a question also, right?
It's more of a response to something you said. When you barricade doors, you said if you stand closer, when the guy comes in, you should attack him. I feel he runs in, you run around and run out. Because most people in school or wherever are not physically fit to fight someone who has a gun, probably is younger, and stronger than you are. You're endangering yourself greatly if you confront him. So if you're standing by the door and he's running in, he's gonna run past you. You should just run out.
So a couple things I want to go over a little bit further with that. So I understand exactly what you're saying. There's tremendous, an elderly person, this 90-year-old person, how much are they going to be able to do, right? Nonetheless.
Even 50 also have a shit.
I'm 52. So I just ran 3 miles this morning, so I hope so. So anyway, so listen, the reality is, yes, listen, I pulled over and it was bad. I pulled over someone as a sergeant, I pulled over someone for no seatbelt on a checkpoint. I was helping out my officers and he was huge. He was huge. Couldn't get, I can't get the seatbelt on because I'm so big. I don't mean like huge like this. I mean huge like this, right? I ended up giving him a lecture because he was 15 years younger than me. And I said, maybe we should lose some weight. Probably wasn't the best idea. I don't know if I got a complaint. I might have, but nonetheless. So I didn't give him a ticket though, so that was nice. In any event, I did make him wear a seatbelt. I just want to look at the difficulty of that scenario. If people, first of all, that older person or someone who's out of shape, it's very difficult for them to run away of a dedicated individual that's looking to kill people. You look at the Virginia Tech incident, he methodically walked down the aisle, calmly, casually, just shooting people. Even look at the video of the gunman going into these people, he's not running frantically doing this. The mindset is really like, I'm going to kill as many people as I can. So yeah, maybe someone could run by that individual, but they'll shoot him in the back. The idea is from past experience and past training. And once again, this is a national standard. This isn't Seth saying, hey, I think this is a good idea. This is something they've done through the research to show what can be done in an incident. And I'm not saying that's the preferred thing to do. The preferred thing is he or she does not get into the building. We don't want him in. The better thing is law enforcement gets there before he has any encounter with any of the members there, and they stop him, and they stop that individual. The worst case scenario, that's the worst case scenario. You barricaded the door and the person gets in. First of all, you have all those chairs in front of you. Someone can be able to run through nonetheless. The idea is, just like in the video, if you can control the gun, you can control the incident. Watch the incident that occurred in the train in Paris as well. Watch the movie because it's pretty good. They're the actors that were involved in the real thing. And you can see how they were controlling the gunman, controlling the firearm, getting it away from him. And yes, they're in much better shape. I get that. I understand that. But remember, this is fighting to survive, no matter what age you are, no matter what condition you are in. You'd be surprised what the human body can do when it's under that stress level, when the adrenaline is pumping. Remember, the blood is flowing, that fight and flight syndrome is going into play, and you might not have no choice. And that's the bottom line. Because it goes back to, if you can get away and run, excellent. Scenario like that, you want to be away from it. The further you're away from an active shooter, the better it is. But that might not be the case and might not be the solution that you could do given that situation. So we give these as options to do. And not everybody will be able to fight. Look at the woman that lied down in the aisle there. She just gave up and I'm going to play dead, and that's the tactic I'm using. We're trying to get people to realize is that won't work. That won't work. So you need to be able to fight for your own life, because that potentially is what it comes down to. So, any other questions? Someone had a question here?
Several city council neighborhood, the C of O reads something, but it assumes that there's the ability to leave because they're like double doors. But for security reasons, some of the double doors, only one door opens. Because, for example, they said if there is an active shooter or somebody outside, we want to be able to have an easy time unlocking the inner door. So while there are double doors, one of them is now stationary. One of them is locked, and you you can only go in and out. So from the one hand, we want to be secure. On the other hand, the fire department would probably have to fit. What's a good balance?
So the balance is this: you never compromise fire safety for security, number one. There are technology and hardware components that comply with fire codes, but also secure the facility better. They make great locks, school approved locking systems for classrooms that have a double lock on it and a way to lock it, but there's one step to get out. You always have to have clear and free egress out. Getting in is a different story. Going out the emergency exit, you couldn't put a thumb throw deadbolt on these doors. It's an emergency exit. You can't have that. Panic push bar, one way. You can't have a magnet on that door and have a push bar where you have to push a button on the side and push the push bar. One way of egress, one motion, not two. So these are things that have to be considered when you're planning. So the reality is this: there's much more of a chance for a fire in your facility than there is an active shooter. So that's one of the main reasons not to give up fire safety for security. You have to balance both, and you could do that. You could do that. We just had a great presentation from a architectural door hardware consultant that specializes in securing doors, who talks about this very issue. One of the things we do when we do our assessments of the facility, we put it in there multiple times, is follow fire and building codes on all installations that you're doing. So the last thing we want is when there's a fire and you can't get out a door because of a lock you put on there for security. There are ways to do it safely that the fire department will come in and they'll be like, oh yeah, that's fine, one motion out and so on. Fire department, building department approved types of lockers. Hope that answers your question. So I've seen it all. I've seen, and I understand it. You know, people get scared. They see these things happen and you want to be able to secure the location. So you take, and you don't have the funds to do it and so on. You take an easy step to throw a deadbolt on a door that shouldn't have a deadbolt. Slide bolts on emergency exits. It should not have slide bolts. When a fire and it's dark and it's smoking and people are trying to get out, they're never going to be able to get out. And God forbid people can die because of that. You don't want to do that. I understand the concept behind it, but there are ways to do it that you can safely secure that door from an active assailant or burglar, whatever it might be, without compromising safety for other emergencies like fire. Yes, sir.
I guess the scenario that concerns me is we have, let's say, kids. You know, in Orthodox congregations, it's very prevalent that kids will run in and out and play. It's probably more disciplined in a conservative synagogue. But, you know, how does that interact with safety, with security?
Listen, there's some things you're able to control very well. There's other things you can't. You have to make sure you have proper supervision and so on. The kids also, I mean, depending on the age, they need to know what to do and how they're going to know if there's an emergency and so on. It's not easy. Ideally, if they're inside your building, at least you have the exterior doors that are controlled so no one can come inside the building. And then you have to have procedures in place as to what to do. How are you going to round up these kids in an emergency? How are you going to do it and so on? It's not easy. It's not easy. It could be in all parts of the building and so on. And it becomes more difficult, especially if you initiate a lockdown. You know, I have facilities that Orthodox schools, they have a lockdown button that will lock out the people from the building on electronic access control in an emergency. They'll use it on Shabbat in an emergency. We're talking life and death, right? It outweighs everything. It's things that you need to work out on an individual basis to determine how you could best do it. And maybe it calls, once again, for key lay people in the institution and staff members to help out and figure out how you're going to monitor them and so on. So not easy. I know they're running around, and conservative schools too, they're running around all over the place too. But it's tough, and you got to try to figure out what's the best scenario.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
As I say, a lot to digest, but very, very important, pertinent in our today's time. You know, I just saw a report today that just an reported anti-Semitic incidents. There was an increase of 400% between February of this year and February of last year, 400%. And, you know, it's not just obviously in the Jewish community, it's in the Asian community, it's in many other communities. We have to be aware, we have to be vigilant, and we need to work together with our law enforcement, and we need to work together with members like the CSI to guide us and instruct us of what we should be doing, God forbid, in case of a real emergency. So I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank everyone who's been online for joining in. Taylor, how did they contact us if they want a recording? Okay, so just reach out to our office and we'll be happy to supply anyone with a recording of this presentation. Again, thanks to Seth and Mitch and to my good friends, Sam, Liz, and Nick. Thank you for being here. I work together with the 102 very closely, and thank everyone for coming. Have a good evening. What? Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So you